Have you ever felt like a passenger in your own body, watching helplessly as your mind wanders into a dark forest of anxiety, distraction, or self-doubt? Why is it that the one thing we truly own, our consciousness, is often the hardest thing to control? We set intentions to be productive, to be calm, or to be happy, yet within minutes, our thoughts have hijacked the steering wheel, and this isn't a flaw in your character. It is the natural state of the biological machinery sitting behind your eyes. But there is a way to reclaim the cockpit. To understand how, we have to look at the life of a man named Elias. Elias was a high achiever, a man whose external life looked like a masterpiece of order, yet his internal world was a chaotic storm. Every night, as his head hit the pillow, his mind would begin a marathon of what-ifs and should-haves. He would replay a conversation from 3 years ago, or worry about a meeting 3 weeks away. His mind was a hyperactive child with a megaphone, and he had no idea how to take the megaphone away. Elias felt like a prisoner to his own impulses. If he felt a spark of anger, he became the anger. If he felt a wave of procrastination, he became the sloth. He lived in a state of constant reaction, never realizing that between a thought and an action, there is a tiny sacred space where his power actually lived. To help Elias, and to help ourselves, we must first understand the fundamental illusion of the mind. Most of us believe that we are our thoughts. We hear a voice in our head saying, "I am not good enough," and we accept it as a clinical fact. But imagine Elias standing on a bridge over a busy highway. The cars passing below are his thoughts. Some are bright and fast, others are heavy and slow, and some are carrying dangerous cargo. If Elias jumps onto every car that passes, he will be dragged in 1,000 different directions, exhausted and bruised. Control doesn't mean stopping the traffic. It means staying on the bridge. It means becoming the observer of the traffic, rather than the victim of it. The first step Elias had to take in mastering his mind was the practice of radical detachment. In the middle of a stressful workday, when his chest would tighten and his thoughts would start to spiral, he learned to stop and label the experience. Instead of saying, "I am stressed," he began saying, "I am noticing a feeling of stress." This subtle shift in language changed everything, created a wedge of distance. By naming the emotion, Elias moved the activity in his brain from the reactive emotional center to the logical prefrontal cortex. He was no longer the storm. He was the meteorologist watching the storm. He began to see his thoughts as mental events rather than absolute truths. As Elias practiced this, he encountered the second great hurdle of the mind, the craving for distraction. Our brains are wired for novelty, a relic of our ancestors who had to be hyper-aware of every rustle in the grass. In the modern world, this translates to a constant itch to check a phone, to eat when we aren't hungry, or to chase a hit of dopamine. Elias realized that every time he gave in to a mindless impulse, he was training his mind to be more scattered. He was feeding the very monster he wanted to tame. He had to learn the art of urge surfing. When the intense desire to distract himself arose, he wouldn't fight it with white-knuckled willpower, because resistance often creates more tension. Instead, he would simply sit with the urge, feeling it rise like a wave, peaking, and eventually breaking against the shore of his resolve. But controlling the mind isn't just about sitting still. It's about the physical environment we provide for our biology. Elias noticed that his most uncontrollable days usually followed nights of poor sleep or mornings fueled by nothing but caffeine and cortisol. The mind is not a ghost in a machine. It is the machine. He started to treat his brain like a high-performance engine. He realized that a cluttered desk led to a cluttered mind, and a sedentary body led to a stagnant spirit. By moving his body, he processed the adrenaline that kept his mind on high alert. He began to see that discipline in the physical world was the scaffolding upon which mental discipline was built. One evening, Elias sat in his garden, watching the sunset, and realized that his greatest enemy was the default mode network. This is the part of the brain that turns on when we aren't doing anything specific, and it is almost always focused on the past, the future, or the self. It is the home of the ego. To control his mind, Elias had to learn how to flip the switch from this me-centered thinking to task-centered presence. He did this through a technique called sensory grounding. He would force his mind to identify 5 things he could see, 4 things he could feel, 3 things he could hear, 2 things he could smell, and one thing he could taste. This simple exercise acted like an anchor, pulling his consciousness out of the clouds of abstraction and slamming it back into the reality of the present moment. However, the deepest secret Elias discovered was that the mind cannot be controlled through hatred. Many people try to beat their minds into submission. They get angry at themselves for being distracted or judge themselves for having dark thoughts. But Elias found that the mind is like a frightened animal. The more you yell at it, the more erratic it becomes. He had to learn a sense of gentle firming. When his mind wandered, he would acknowledge it with a smile, as if watching a puppy go astray, and then gently lead it back to the path. This lack of judgment removed the second. He wasn't just controlling his mind, he was befriending it. Months later, the change in Elias was profound. He still had negative thoughts. He still felt the pull of distraction. But the difference was that he was no longer a slave to them. He had built a fortress of awareness. When a thought of failure entered his mind, he would look at it, acknowledge its presence, and then let it pass by like a cloud. He realized that the mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. By taking the seat of the observer, he had finally claimed his throne. He wasn't trying to stop the waves of life anymore. It simply learned how to surf. The journey to mental mastery is not a destination you reach, but a rhythm you live. It requires the courage to face the silence and the patience to start over every time you fail. Like Elias, you must realize that your thoughts are just suggestions, not commands. You have the power to choose which voices you listen to and which ones you allow to fade into the background. It starts with a single breath, a single moment of noticing, and the radical realization that you are the one who decides where your attention goes. If you found value in this story and want to dive deeper into the mysteries of the human psyche and the power of your own consciousness, I invite you to join our community. Every journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step toward self-awareness. Thank you for walking this path with us. Please subscribe to DeepMind Portal for more insights into the incredible world of the mind. Would you like me to expand on any specific psychological technique mentioned in Elias's story, such as urge surfing or sensory grounding?